The first time Marcus Crowe saw the boy, he thought he was seeing a ghost. Late October in Bakersfield. The kind of night when the desert cold comes fast and mean, cutting through leather like it has something to prove. Marcus had pulled his Harley into an abandoned gas station off Route 58 to check a noise in his engine. A tick, faint but wrong. The Iron Saints MC didn't ride with mechanical problems. Not ever. He crouched beside the bike, flashlight clenched between his teeth, fingers black with grease. The only sounds were the tick of the cooling engine, the distant hiss of the highway, and the wind moaning through broken windows. That's when he heard the voice. "Your lifter's going bad, hydraulic. You can hear it when she's warm." Marcus spun around, hand moving toward his belt, before his brain caught up. But there was no threat, just a boy stepping out from behind the rusted pumps, like he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. Maybe 10 years old, maybe 11. Hard to tell when a kid looked like this. Filthy. Clothes too thin for weather that could kill. Hair matted against his skull. And eyes. God, those eyes. They belonged to someone who'd already lived 3 lifetimes, none of them kind. "What did you say?" Marcus asked. "Your lifter." The boy pointed at the engine with a dirt-caked finger. "I can fix it. I'm good with bikes." Marcus stood slowly. At 6'4", covered in tattoos that told stories he'd never share, with a beard that reached his chest and a leather cut that read Sergeant at Arms across the back, he knew exactly what he looked like. He'd watched mothers pull their children closer when he walked past. He'd seen grown men cross streets to avoid him. This boy didn't flinch, not once. "You live out here?" Marcus asked. The boy shrugged. "Sometimes." "Where are your parents?" Something flickered in those ancient eyes, a door slamming shut. "Gone." One word. But Marcus heard the whole story in it. The abandonment, the system, the failures stacked on failures, until a child ends up behind a gas station in the desert, offering to fix a stranger's motorcycle just to have someone to talk to. Marcus studied him closer. Soldier's eyes. The kind that had learned to assess threats and injuries in a single sweep. The boy's hands were calloused, grease-stained, mechanic's hands on a child's frame. His cheeks were hollow, and his shoulder blades poked through his thin shirt like wings trying to escape a body that had forgotten how to grow. "What's your name?" "Eli." The boy stepped closer, and Marcus could see him shivering now. Not the fake kind kids do for sympathy. The real kind. The kind that comes from sleeping on concrete when the temperature drops into the 40s. "I'll fix your bike for free. He stopped, swallowed hard. Like the next words cost him something. "I just want to be your friend. That's all. Just someone to talk to sometimes." Marcus Crowe had been a lot of things in his 46 years. A soldier who'd seen things that still visited him at 3 a.m. A convict who'd paid his debt in years he'd never get back. A man who'd done things that kept him awake, staring at ceilings, wondering if God kept score. But standing in that abandoned station, looking at a homeless child offering labor, for the simple currency of human connection, he felt something crack open in his chest. Something he'd sealed shut 15 years ago, the night his own son died. For just a second, Marcus saw another face layered over this one. Another boy. Different eyes, but the same desperate hope. The memory hit like a fist to the sternum, and he had to look away. "Stay here," Marcus said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He walked to the gas station's attached mini-mart. The windows were boarded up, but the door was unlocked. Someone had cleaned out most of the inventory years ago, but Marcus found what he was looking for. Dusty packages of beef jerky and peanut butter crackers, 2 bottles of water that had somehow survived. When he came back, Eli was exactly where he'd left him, standing perfectly still, like he'd learned that moving too much attracted the wrong kind of attention. Marcus handed him the food without ceremony. Eli looked at it like it might bite him. "Eat," Marcus said. "Then we'll talk about that lifter." Eli didn't need to be told twice. He tore into the jerky with the controlled desperation of someone who'd learned to eat fast before someone took it away. But his eyes never left Marcus, watching, calculating, waiting for the catch. There was always a catch. "How'd you know about the lifter?" Marcus asked, settling onto an overturned crate. "Most mechanics twice your age couldn't diagnose that by sound." Eli swallowed his mouthful before answering. "My dad, before he left. He worked on bikes. I used to help him." "He teach you?" "Some. Mostly I just watched. Then I practiced on whatever I could find." Eli gestured vaguely at the darkness around them. "There's an old Sportster behind the building. Been taking it apart and putting it back together. It helps me think." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. This kid wasn't just surviving out here. He was maintaining his sanity by doing the one thing that connected him to better days. "How long you been on your own?" Eli's jaw tightened. 3 months this time." "This time?" "I've been in 4 group homes. They're all the same. Too many kids, not enough people who care. I kept running." "Running where?" "Anywhere that wasn't there." Eli looked down at the cracker package in his hands. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. "The last one was bad. The guy who ran it, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Marcus had seen that particular silence before. In fellow soldiers, in inmates, in the mirror. It was the silence of someone who'd learned that some things couldn't be spoken, only carried. "I'm not going back," Eli said. There was no defiance in his voice, just fact. "I'd rather live out here forever than go back to someone like him." Marcus looked at this boy, this 10-year-old kid who'd already survived more than most adults could imagine, who could diagnose a Harley engine in the dark, who was offering friendship like it was a precious commodity because, for him, it was. The smart thing to do was call CPS. Let the system handle it. Get back on his bike and ride away before this situation got complicated. But Marcus Crowe had never been particularly smart. "You got a jacket?" he asked. Eli shook his head. Marcus unzipped his saddlebag and pulled out a spare flannel. It was big enough to be a dress on the kid, but it was warm. He handed it over without a word. "Put that on and finish eating. Then I'm going to let you look at that lifter. Show me what you know." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus watched a child do what half the mechanics in Bakersfield couldn't. Eli's hands moved with confidence and precision, explaining each step as he went. He didn't just know what was wrong, he understood why. "See here?" Eli pointed to a worn component with a flashlight Marcus had given him. "The plunger's not getting enough oil. Could be the oil pump, but I think it's just buildup in the channel. You clean that out, she'll run quiet for another 10,000 miles. Marcus stared at him. "How old are you?" 10, 11 in March. "Who the hell taught you all this?" "I told you. I watched. I practiced." Eli shrugged. "Engines make sense. They do what they're supposed to do. If something's wrong, there's a reason. You find the reason, you fix it." He looked up at Marcus with those old eyes. "People don't work like that." No, they don't." The wind picked up, sending a piece of trash skittering across the cracked concrete. In the distance, a coyote called out, and another answered. The desert was waking up, and it had no mercy for small things left unprotected. Marcus made his decision. "Listen," he said, "I'm part of a motorcycle club, the Iron Saints. We've got a clubhouse about 30 miles from here. It's warm, there's food, a bed." Eli's whole body tensed, the guard going back up. "What do you want?" "Nothing. I'm not that guy." Marcus held his gaze, letting the boy search his face for lies. "I just think you've spent enough nights out here. One night somewhere safe won't hurt you." "And then what? You call the cops? Send me back?" No cops, no calls, just tonight. Marcus paused. And maybe tomorrow you take another look at that lifter. Show my brothers what you can do. Eli studied him for a long moment, the way prey studies a predator, trying to determine if the risk is worth the reward. Finally, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Just tonight, he said, more to himself than to Marcus, like he was setting a boundary, like he'd learned that boundaries were the only things that kept you safe. Just tonight, Marcus agreed. He climbed onto his Harley and felt the bike dip slightly as Eli climbed on behind him. Small, arms wrapped around his waist, thin arms, arms that had never been held the way children should be held. Marcus kicked the engine to life. As they pulled out of the abandoned station and onto Route 58, he felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Since the funeral, since he'd buried his boy and buried his heart in the same grave, he felt hope, and it terrified him. The ride took 40 minutes. Eli didn't speak, didn't move, just held on with those thin arms and watched the desert fly past like he was memorizing it, like he was mapping escape routes even now. When the clubhouse came into view, its lights glowing against the dark desert sky, Marcus felt Eli's grip tighten. Whatever came next, everything was about to change. Neither of them knew how much. The Iron Saints clubhouse sat at the end of a dirt road that didn't appear on any map. From the outside, it looked like what it was: a converted warehouse surrounded by rows of Harleys gleaming under security lights. Inside, it was something else entirely. Part home, part fortress, part church, for men who'd stopped believing in anything except each other. Marcus pulled into the lot at midnight. By the time he'd killed the engine, 3 brothers had already stepped outside to see who was rolling in this late. Bear saw the kid first. 6'5", 300 pounds, and currently frozen mid-step, with a beer in his hand. Marcus, he said slowly, you got something on your bike? I know. It's a child. I know. Eli had already climbed off. He stood behind Marcus, like a shadow, taking in the clubhouse, the bikes, the massive men staring at him, with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. Inside, Marcus said. I need to talk to Brick. The main room of the clubhouse fell silent when Marcus walked in with Eli at his heels. 12 men, 12 sets of eyes, 12 different calculations happening behind weathered faces. Jake Brick. Sullivan sat at the head of the long table, nursing a whiskey, president of the Iron Saints for 11 years, built like a fire hydrant, shaved head, and knuckles that told their own stories. He looked at Marcus, looked at Eli, and set down his glass with deliberate care. Marcus, what is this? This is Eli. He needs a place to stay. The silence stretched. Then Brick's palm came down on the table, hard enough to rattle glasses. Absolutely not. His voice was cold iron. We're not a daycare, Marcus. We're not social services. You want to help the kid? Call CPS. CPS will put him in a group home. He's been in 4 already. He runs every time. That's not our problem. I'm making it our problem. The 2 men stared at each other. The rest of the club watched, barely breathing. This was Marcus Crowe, the man who'd pulled 3 brothers out of a burning van in Nevada. The man who'd done 4 years in prison rather than give up club business. He didn't ask for things. He certainly didn't bring strays home. He knew my lifter was going bad just by listening, Marcus said. 10 years old, and he diagnosed a Harley in the dark. The kid's got a gift. Danny Priest, Warren, the club's unofficial chaplain, leaned back in his chair. So does my cousin. He can eat 40 hot dogs in 10 minutes. Doesn't mean I'm bringing him to church. Laughter around the table. But Marcus didn't smile. His name is Eli. He's been living behind the old Texaco for 3 months. Before that, he was in a foster placement where Marcus stopped. His jaw tightened, tendons standing out in his neck. The man who was supposed to protect him did the opposite. The laughter died. Every man at that table carried scars, some visible, some buried so deep they only surfaced in nightmares. Most had come from hard places, from homes where love was measured in bruises, from streets where childhood ended early and violently, from systems that chewed up kids and spit out survivors, or statistics. Brick himself had grown up in a house where his father's belt had drawn more blood than any knife. He'd never talked about it. Didn't have to. The scars on his back spoke for him. The silence now was different, heavier. Every man in the room was looking at Eli with new eyes. The boy stood perfectly still, not scared exactly, more like resigned, like he'd been here before, waiting for the verdict from people who held his fate in their hands. "What exactly are you proposing?" Brick asked quietly. "Let him stay in the back bay, just until winter passes. He works on our bikes, earns his keep. We figure out something more permanent. And if the cops come asking, then we handle it." Marcus met Brick's eyes. "Like we handle everything." Brick looked around the table. "Vote," he said. One by one, hands went up. Bare. Yes. The big man couldn't stop staring at Eli's hollow cheeks. Priest. Yes. Something in his chaplain's soul couldn't say no. Bobby Road, Captain Vasquez. No. He had kids of his own. Didn't want complications. Shadow, the club's paranoid conspiracy theorist. No. Saw trouble in everything. Whiskey, yes. Too drunk to care, but still a yes. The votes continued. Some hands went up reluctantly. Others stayed down with equal reluctance. Marcus watched each one, memorizing who stood with him. The final count, 7-5, close, too close. But in the Iron Saints, majority ruled. Eli had a home. The first month was rocky. That's the polite way of saying it. The truth was uglier. The truth was a boy who didn't know how to accept kindness without waiting for the knife hidden behind it. When Jolene, Bobby's wife, brought Eli new clothes, good clothes, warm clothes, he thanked her politely. An hour later, Marcus found them hidden under the mattress in the back bay. Still in the bags. Still tagged. "Why didn't you put them on?" Marcus asked. Eli shrugged. "Someone might take them back." "Nobody's taking anything from you here." But Eli just looked at him with those ancient eyes, the eyes of a child who'd learned that promises were just lies that hadn't revealed themselves yet. He didn't sleep well either. Marcus discovered this the second night when he found Eli pacing the garage at 2 a.m., checking and rechecking the locks on every door. "What are you doing?" "It's too quiet," Eli said. "I can't sleep when it's quiet." Marcus understood more than he let on. Eli had grown up in chaos, group homes with 30 kids, and never enough supervision. The streets where silence meant someone was sneaking up on you. Peace felt like the moment before a blow landed, the calm before violence. "Come on," Marcus said. "I'll show you something." He took Eli to the main garage, where a collection of bikes sat in various states of repair. In the far corner, covered by a dusty tarp, was something special. Marcus pulled the tarp away. 1978 shovelhead, he said. "Been sitting here for 6 years. Nobody's had time to work on it." Eli's eyes went wide, not scared wide. Something else, hunger wide, the way some kids looked at Christmas presents. "She's in bad shape," Marcus continued. "Engines seized, electrics are shot. Half the parts are rusted beyond saving." He paused. "But if someone wanted to try, I could fix her." It wasn't a question. It wasn't bravado. It was simple fact, spoken with the certainty of someone who understood machines the way other people understood breathing. "She's yours," Marcus said. "You get her running, you keep her until you're old enough to ride." That night, for the first time since arriving, Eli slept through until morning. The transformation wasn't instant. It was gradual, like watching a flower bloom in slow motion, except this flower had thorns and trust issues. But give Eli an engine, and everything changed. The club watched in amazement as he dismantled the shovelhead with surgical precision. Every bolt cataloged, every component cleaned and assessed. He talked to the parts as he worked, a soft murmuring that the other bikers pretended not to hear. "You're okay," he whispered to a corroded carburetor. "We're going to clean you up, get you breathing again." Marcus found himself standing at the garage door more often than not, watching. Other brothers drifted in too. Bear, who'd initially voted yes out of instinct, now brought Eli sandwiches and stood silently while the boy ate. Shadow, who still thought this was a bad idea, couldn't help offering advice on electrical systems. Even Brick came by, said nothing. Just watched the small hands moving with impossible confidence among the engine parts. 3 weeks in, Eli needed a part that didn't exist anymore. The original rocker arm assembly had been discontinued 40 years ago. "I can make one," Eli said matter-of-factly. "I just need access to the machine shop." Marcus looked at Brick, who looked at Bobby, who looked back at Marcus. "You know how to use a lathe?" Bobby asked. "I know how to learn." Brick rubbed his jaw. "Show him, Bobby, but if he loses a finger, that's on you." Eli didn't lose a finger. What he did was fabricate a component that matched the original specifications so precisely that even Bobby, who'd been machining parts for 20 years, couldn't tell the difference. "Kid's a savant," Bobby told Marcus that night. "I've never seen anything like it. He just understands metal, like it talks to him." The night the shovelhead roared to life was the night everything shifted. It was a Tuesday, late November, cold enough that breath fogged in the garage. Eli had been working on the final assembly for 16 hours straight, refusing food, refusing sleep, refusing everything except the singular focus of resurrection. The club had gathered without being asked. 12 men standing in a semicircle, holding beers. Nobody was drinking. Waiting. Eli's hands were shaking as he connected the last wire. He looked up at Marcus, something vulnerable flickering behind the usual guardedness. "What if it doesn't work?" "Then you figure out why and try again. That's how it goes." Eli nodded, took a breath, turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. Eli's face crumpled for just a second, then hardened. He was already reaching for tools, already diagnosing, when Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "Try again. One more time." Eli turned the key. The cough, the sputter, and then the roar. The 1978 shovelhead came alive, like it had been sleeping instead of dead. The sound filled the garage, shook the walls, rattled every tool on every bench. 46 years of motorcycle, and it sounded brand new. Eli smiled. It was the kind of smile that broke your heart and healed it simultaneously. The smile of a child who'd forgotten he was allowed to feel joy. The smile of someone who'd just proven, to himself more than anyone, that broken things could be fixed. Around the garage, 12 hardened bikers were doing something they'd never admit to later. They were crying. The bonding happened in pieces after that. Small moments that built into something bigger. Marcus started teaching Eli to read, not from scratch. The kid knew the basics, but he'd missed years of school. His reading level was somewhere around 4th grade, nowhere near where it should be. They sat together every morning with a battered copy of The Old Man and the Sea. Marcus had chosen it deliberately, a story about perseverance, about fighting even when you're losing, about dignity in the face of impossible odds. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream. Eli read slowly, finger tracking each word. And he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish. Good. What do you think that means? 84 days without catching anything? Eli considered. He's hungry, but he keeps going anyway. Why? Because... Eli frowned, working it out. Because giving up would be worse than being hungry? Marcus nodded slowly. That's exactly right. Brick taught him chess. This surprised everyone, including Brick. But the old president had seen something in Eli that reminded him of himself at that age. Too smart for his own good. Too angry to know what to do with it. Chess isn't about winning, Brick explained during their first game. It's about seeing 3 moves ahead, understanding what your opponent wants before they know they want it. Like knowing when someone's going to hit you before they swing? Brick paused, set down the piece he'd been holding. Yeah, he said quietly, like that. Except in chess, you get to hit back. Eli won his first game against Brick in under 3 weeks. Nobody mentioned that Brick had been playing for 40 years. Bobby's card tricks were lighter fare. He taught Eli sleight of hand in the evenings, Jolene rolling her eyes from the kitchen doorway as cards appeared and disappeared in small hands. You're not actually supposed to catch me, Bobby complained, when Eli spotted the palm on a 4-card Monty. Then be faster. Kid's got no respect, Bobby muttered to Jolene, but he was grinning. Jolene brought something else, normalcy. She made Eli do homework before he could work on bikes. She enforced bedtimes and vegetables and all the mundane necessities of childhood that he'd missed. At first, he resisted. Rules felt like cages. But Jolene had raised 3 kids of her own. She knew how to be firm without being harsh, how to set boundaries that felt like protection instead of punishment. You eat your green beans, she told him one night, and I'll let you have first pick of dessert. What if I don't want dessert? Then you still eat your green beans, and you don't get dessert. Eli stared at her. Then, slowly, he started laughing. It was the first time any of them had heard him laugh. The word came out on a Thursday in December. Eli was helping Marcus change the oil in a customer's bike. They'd been working in comfortable silence for an hour when Eli spoke. Marcus? Yeah? What happens when winter's over? Marcus paused. What do you mean? You said I could stay until winter passes. That was the deal. Eli's voice was carefully neutral, the voice of someone preparing for rejection. So what happens after? Marcus set down his wrench, looked at this boy who'd come into his life 2 months ago and somehow rearranged everything. I've been thinking about that, Marcus said. I talked to a lawyer. There's a process, legal guardianship. Takes time, but it's possible. You want to keep me? I want you to have a home, a real one, not until winter passes, forever. Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, Marcus almost missed it. Okay? Okay? Okay. I'd like that. They went back to working on the bike, but something had shifted. Some final wall had crumbled. That night, as Marcus walked through the garage one last time before bed, he found Eli still awake in the back bay. The boy was sitting on his mattress, holding the small leather vest the club had made for him. Not club colors. They'd never go that far, but something close. On the back, stitched, in gold thread, was his road name, Ghost. Because he'd appeared out of nowhere. Because he moved through the garage, silent as shadow. Because, as Brick said, the kid needed to know he belongs to something. You should be asleep, Marcus said from the doorway. Eli looked up, and in his eyes, Marcus saw something new, something that hadn't been there when they'd met, something that looked almost like peace. Dad? The word hung in the air, small, tentative, revolutionary. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Eli into a hug, felt the thin shoulders shake, felt the tears soaking into his shirt, felt 15 years of frozen grief finally beginning to thaw. Yeah, he said, I'm here, son. I'm here. The social worker arrived on a Tuesday in January. Her name was Catherine Marsh, and she had the kind of eyes that had seen too much and still believed in procedure. Procedure was all she had left. The rules, the forms, the proper channels. They were the only things that made sense in a world full of broken children and broken systems. She stood in the clubhouse doorway, flanked by 2 police officers, with a court order in her hand and certainty in her spine. "We've received reports of an unaccompanied minor living on these premises," she said. "I need to see the child." Marcus felt his brother's close ranks behind him, 12 men in leather and denim, faces carved from stone. "There's no child here," Brick said calmly. "You've been misinformed." "Mr. Sullivan, I have testimony from a concerned citizen who— Are you calling me a liar?" The officers shifted uncomfortably. They knew the Iron Saints. They knew this was a conversation that could go very bad very quickly. "I'm calling for cooperation," Catherine said. She didn't flinch. Marcus noticed that. Noticed the steel under the bureaucratic exterior. "A child's welfare is at stake. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear." From the back room, a door opened. Eli walked out, clean now, healthy, 15 pounds heavier than October. He was wearing his vest, the one with Ghost on the back. His chin was up. His eyes were clear. He walked straight to Marcus and stood beside him, close, shoulder to shoulder, with the mountain of a man who'd become his father. Then he looked at Catherine Marsh with those 2 old eyes. "I'm not leaving," he said. Catherine's expression softened despite herself. "Sweetheart, I know this feels safe, but these men are my family." Eli's voice didn't waver. "My real family threw me away. My foster family hurt me. These men chose me. That's more than anyone ever did before. The state has protocols. Your protocols put me in a house with a man who—" Eli stopped, breathed, steadied himself. "Your protocols failed me. They didn't." Catherine looked at Marcus, at the hand he'd placed on Eli's shoulder, at the way 12 hardened bikers had arranged themselves in a protective semicircle around a child. "I'll be back with the judge's order," she said. But something in her voice had changed. The certainty had cracked, just slightly, just enough. She didn't sound like someone coming to take a child. She sounded like someone starting to question whether she should. The court date was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Marcus thought the universe had a sick sense of humor. The Iron Saints hired a lawyer named Angela Reeves, sharp, expensive, the kind of woman who specialized in impossible cases because she liked proving people wrong. She sat across from Marcus in the clubhouse, legal pad covered in notes, and gave him the truth without softening it. "The odds aren't good," she said. "You have a criminal record. The club has a reputation. The state strongly favors institutional placement over unconventional arrangements, especially when those arrangements involve bikers? That's one way to put it." Marcus absorbed this. "What do we have?" "Eli." Angela leaned forward. "If he can testify, really testify, about what this placement means to him, we have a chance. Judges respond to children who advocate for themselves, but he'll have to be strong. They'll ask hard questions. They'll try to determine if he's been coached. He hasn't been. I know, but they don't." Angela gathered her papers. "Prepare him, Marcus. Prepare yourself. This is going to be the fight of your life." That night, Marcus found Eli on the roof of the clubhouse, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the stars. "You shouldn't be up here," Marcus said, climbing up beside him. "It's freezing." "I like the cold. Reminds me I'm alive." They sat in silence for a while. The desert sky stretched endlessly above them, stars burning white in the blackness. "You scared?" Marcus finally asked, terrified. "Want to run?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was older than his years, older than it had any right to be. "Before I came here, running was all I knew. Something bad happens, You disappear. You survive. You find somewhere new until that goes bad too. It's the only thing that ever kept me safe. And now? The boy turned to look at him. In the moonlight, Marcus could see tears tracking down his cheeks. Silent tears. The kind that come when you're so full of feeling that it has to leak out somehow. Now, I have something worth staying for, and that's scarier than running ever was. Eli's voice cracked. Because what if I stay and they take it anyway? What if I fight and I lose? Marcus put his arm around those thin shoulders, felt them shaking with sobs the boy had been holding in for months, for years, maybe his whole life. Then you lose knowing you fought, Marcus said, and that changes something inside you, forever. That's what makes a man, Eli, not the winning, the standing. He pulled the boy closer, let him cry, let himself cry too, just a little, where no one but the stars could see. You taught me that, Eli whispered, when I fixed the shovel head, when it didn't start the first time. You remember what I said? Try again, one more time. That's right. Marcus tilted the boy's chin up, making him meet his eyes. That's all we're doing here, son. Trying again. One more time. Eli nodded slowly, wiped his face with his sleeve. Okay, he said. Okay? Okay, I'll stand. A small, fierce smile. I'll fight. They sat on that roof until the cold drove them inside, father and son. Not by blood, by something stronger, by choice. Word spread through the biker community like wildfire through dry brush. It started with a single phone call. Brick to a contact in the Desert Wolves, a club out of Phoenix they'd ridden with back in '09. Just a heads up, one of ours is fighting for his kid. Court date's Valentine's Day. That contact called another. That one called 3 more. By the end of the week, the story of Eli and the Iron Saints had reached every club in California, Nevada, and Arizona. A homeless boy, a broken system, a brotherhood that chose him anyway. The responses came flooding back. We'll be there. Count us in. Tell us where and when. Marcus hadn't asked for help, hadn't expected it. But that's the thing about the biker community. When family's on the line, you don't have to ask. By February 13th, the night before the hearing, the Iron Saints clubhouse looked like a war council. Road captains from 6 different clubs sat around the long table, planning logistics like they were coordinating a military operation. We need to keep it clean, Brick said. No colors that'll spook the judge. No patches, no vests inside the courtroom. Leather's fine, but we're there as individuals, not clubs. What about the hallway? Asked Tank, president of the Desert Wolves. Massive man. Face like carved granite. Voice like gravel in a blender. The hallway's public space. We fill it, but silent, respectful. We're not there to intimidate. We're there to be counted. Marcus sat at the end of the table, listening. Eli was asleep in the back bay, worn out from a day of preparation with Angela Reeves. The lawyer had drilled him for hours, asking every question the state's attorney might throw at him. You ready for tomorrow? Brick asked Marcus, when the other presidents had left. No. Good. Means you're taking it seriously. Marcus stared at his hands, the hands that had held his dying son 15 years ago, the hands that had pulled Eli off that Harley 3 months ago, the hands that might lose everything tomorrow. What if it's not enough? He asked quietly. What if we do everything right and they still take him? Brick was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and gripped Marcus's shoulder. Then we appeal. Then we fight again. Then we keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. His voice was rough. That boy believes in you, Marcus. Don't you dare stop believing in yourself. Valentine's Day dawned cold and gray. The Kern County Superior Courthouse sat like a monument to bureaucracy in downtown Bakersfield. Stone columns, marble floors, the kind of architecture designed to make individuals feel small. Marcus and Eli arrived at 8 a.m., an hour before the hearing. Angela met them at the entrance, briefcase in hand, game face on. "How are we feeling?" she asked Eli. "Scared." "Good. Honest answers win cases." She knelt down to his level. "Remember what we practiced. Tell the truth. Speak clearly. And if you don't understand a question, ask them to repeat it. There's no shame in that." Eli nodded. He was wearing the nicest clothes Jolene had been able to find, khakis and a button-down that made him look like any other fifth grader heading to a school concert. But his eyes were anything but ordinary. They held the weight of what was coming. Marcus took his hand. Small fingers wrapped around large ones. The grip was tight. "Together," Marcus said. "Together," Eli echoed. They walked inside. The hallway outside courtroom 4B was standing room only. 100 bikers, maybe more. They lined both walls, shoulder to shoulder, a wall of leather and loyalty that stretched from the elevator to the courtroom doors. Silent, respectful. Faces that had seen war, prison, loss, and survival. But today, those faces held something else. Something softer. Something fierce in its tenderness. They were here for a child they'd never met. Because his story was their story. Because broken kids become broken men unless someone breaks the cycle. Marcus felt his throat tighten as he walked between them. Tank stood near the doors. He gave Marcus a single nod. That nod said everything. "We're with you. Whatever happens, you're not alone." Other people in the hallway, lawyers in suits, social workers with clipboards, families waiting for their own hearings, they parted around the bikers like water around stones. Some stared, some hurried past. A few stopped, curious about what kind of case could draw a crowd like this. Eli walked through them all with his chin up. His small vest was hidden under his jacket, but Marcus knew it was there. Ghost. The boy who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. At the courtroom doors, Eli paused, looked back at the sea of leather behind him. "They came for me," he whispered. "They came for family." Something shifted in Eli's face, a crack in the armor he'd spent 10 years building. The armor that said, "Nobody cares. You're alone. Don't trust kindness." Maybe, just maybe, the armor was wrong. Courtroom 4B was smaller than Marcus expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, an American flag in the corner, the kind of room where lives were decided in 90-minute increments. Catherine Marsh sat at the petitioner's table with a state attorney named Paul Dresden. Dresden was young, eager, the type who saw every case as a stepping stone. He'd probably never lost a custody hearing in his life. Angela took her place at the respondent's table. Marcus sat behind her in the gallery, close enough to touch Eli if he needed to. The gallery itself was packed, every seat filled with Iron Saints members who'd traded their vests for plain leather jackets. Brick sat directly behind Marcus, Bobby and Jolene on his left, Bear, Priest, Shadow, the whole club. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff called the court to order. All rise for the Honorable Patricia Holloway. Judge Holloway was not what Marcus had expected. Mid-60s, silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd seen everything and still showed up every day to see more. 23 years on the family court bench, thousands of cases, broken homes and broken promises, and occasionally, rarely, something beautiful. She'd learned long ago that love didn't follow rules, that families came in shapes the law never anticipated, that sometimes the best thing for a child was the thing that looked worst on paper. She studied the room as she took her seat. Her eyes lingered on the gallery full of bikers, then on Eli, sitting small and straight in the front row. "This is a hearing regarding the custody and placement of Eli James Harrison, currently age 11, she announced. "Mr. Dresden, you may proceed." The state's case was exactly what Angela had predicted. Dresden painted a picture of chaos and concern. An unaccompanied minor, living in an unregulated environment with adults of questionable background. He cited Marcus's criminal record, the club's reputation, the lack of proper licensing or foster certification. Your Honor, we're not disputing that Mr. Crow and the Iron Saints have provided housing for this child, Dresden said, his voice dripping with carefully calibrated concern. But providing shelter is not the same as providing care. The state has procedures, protocols, systems designed to protect vulnerable children from well-meaning but unqualified individuals. He paused for effect. And from individuals who may not be well-meaning at all. Marcus felt Brick's hand on his shoulder, a warning. Stay calm. Angela's cross-examination was surgical. She established that Eli had been in state care for 4 years. 4 placements, 4 failures. She got Catherine Marsh to admit, reluctantly, that Eli had run from every single one. So the systems designed to protect him, Angela said, have instead traumatized him further. Is that accurate? The system isn't perfect. Yes or no, Ms. Marsh? Has state custody resulted in additional trauma for this child? Catherine's jaw tightened. Yes. Angela let that hang in the air. Then she turned to the judge. Your Honor, the defense calls Eli Harrison to the stand. Eli walked to the witness chair like a soldier walking into battle. Small, straight-backed, terrified, but refusing to show it. The bailiff held out a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. He climbed into the chair. His feet didn't quite touch the ground. Angela approached slowly, keeping her voice gentle. Eli, can you tell the court about your life before you met Mr. Crow? Eli took a breath, steadied himself. I was in 4 group homes. The first one was okay. Too many kids, not enough beds, but nobody hurt me. The second one was worse. We didn't get enough food, and the older kids would steal whatever you had. What about the third placement? Eli's hands gripped the armrests. That one was a foster family, a man named Gerald. His voice dropped. The whole courtroom leaned forward to hear. Gerald seemed nice at first. He bought me new shoes, took me to the park, but after a few weeks, he stopped, swallowed. Take your time, Angela said softly. He started coming into my room at night. He'd sit on the edge of my bed and his hands. Eli's voice cracked. In the gallery, Jolene pressed her hand to her mouth. Bear's knuckles went white against his knees. I told my social worker. She said Gerald was a respected member of the community. She said maybe I misunderstood. Eli looked up, his eyes bright with tears. He refused to let fall. I didn't misunderstand. I knew what was happening, but nobody believed me. What did you do? I ran. I always run. It's the only thing that keeps me safe. Where did you go? Anywhere. Bus stations, parks, behind a gas station off Route 58. I lived there for 3 months. How did you survive? Eli almost smiled. I'm good with my hands. I found an old motorcycle behind the station, started taking it apart, putting it back together. It helped me think. He paused. Sometimes I talked to the stray dogs that came around. They were the only creatures who didn't look at me with pity or disgust. They just saw me, like I was a person, not a problem. Dresden objected. Your Honor, this testimony is emotional, but irrelevant to the question of proper placement. Overruled. Judge Holloway's voice was quiet but firm. I want to hear what this child has to say. Continue, Eli. Eli looked at her. Really looked, and something passed between them. That's where Marcus found me, he said, in the dark, alone, offering to fix his bike because I just wanted someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't hurt me, or leave me, or put me in another house with another Gerald. And what happened? He gave me food. Let me look at his motorcycle. And then he said something nobody had ever said before. What was that? He said, "Come with me, just for tonight." Eli's voice strengthened. But it wasn't just one night. It was every night. It was every morning. It was 3 meals a day, and a warm place to sleep, and people who taught me things. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. Angela stepped closer. Can you tell the court specifically what you've learned since living with the Iron Saints? Marcus taught me to read better. Real books, not just the easy ones. Brick taught me chess. He says it's about seeing 3 moves ahead. Like life. Bobby taught me card tricks, and Jolene makes me eat vegetables before I can work on engines. Quiet laughter rippled through the gallery. Even Judge Holloway's lips twitched. And the motorcycle work? Pride flickered in Eli's eyes. I rebuilt a 1978 Shovelhead from nothing. It was dead when I started. Rusted, seized, broken. Now it runs. He sat up straighter. I did that. Me. Nobody gave it to me. I earned it. Angela glanced at her notes, then set them aside. This next part was unrehearsed. Eli, why do you want to stay with Mr. Crow and the Iron Saints? The courtroom went silent. Eli looked at Marcus in the gallery. Their eyes met. Father and son. They didn't have to help me, Eli said. They weren't getting anything out of it. No money, no recognition. Some of them didn't even want me there at first. He smiled slightly. I heard the vote was pretty close. More laughter. Brick grunted. But they chose me anyway. Marcus. Eli's voice wavered, steadied. Marcus taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He turned back to Judge Holloway. The tears were falling now, but his voice stayed strong. I know what I look like to you. A case number, a statistic, another kid who'll probably end up in prison or dead by 25. He wiped his face with his sleeve. But when I'm with them, I see something else in the mirror. I see someone who matters. Someone who belongs. His voice finally broke. Please don't take that away from me. I've already lost everything once. I can't do it again. The silence that followed was absolute. Dresden stood to cross-examine, but the fight had gone out of him. His questions were perfunctory. Eli answered each one simply, honestly, without wavering. When he finally stepped down from the stand, Eli walked directly to Marcus and climbed into the seat beside him. Marcus wrapped an arm around his shoulders and held on. Neither of them let go. Judge Holloway took a 30-minute recess to review the evidence. The longest 30 minutes of Marcus's life. Nobody spoke. The gallery sat frozen, watching the closed door to the judge's chambers like it held the secrets of the universe. Eli pressed against Marcus's side, eyes closed, breathing slow. Brick sat behind them like a stone wall. The rest of the club formed a silent perimeter, waiting, just waiting. At 11:47 a.m., the bailiff called the court back to order. Judge Holloway returned to the bench. Her face was unreadable. I've reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, she began. The state's concerns are noted. Mr. Crow's criminal history and the unconventional nature of this placement are legitimate factors for consideration. Marcus felt his heart stop. However, one word, everything changed. In 23 years on this bench, I have learned that love does not follow rules, that safety cannot always be measured in square footage and certification, and that the most important thing any child needs is someone who chooses them, every day, no matter what. She looked at Eli. This child has testified to abuse, neglect, and systematic failure by the very institutions designed to protect him. He has also testified to kindness, stability, and genuine care from an unconventional source. Her gaze moved to Marcus. Mr. Crow, you have a criminal record, but that record shows no violence against children, no history of abuse. What it shows is a man who made mistakes paid his debt, and has spent the years since trying to live with honor. She straightened her papers. The court finds that the best interests of Eli James Harrison are served by granting permanent legal guardianship to Marcus Crowe with the full support and supervision of the Iron Saints Motorcycle Club. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then the courtroom erupted. Bikers who'd fought wars without flinching stood weeping openly. Jolene launched herself across 2 rows to tackle Eli in a hug that lifted him off his feet. Bear actually sobbed, great heaving sounds from a man who'd probably never cried in public in his life. Marcus sat frozen, unable to process, unable to believe. 15 years ago, he'd buried his son, buried his heart in the same grave, told himself he'd never love anything that much again because losing it would kill him. And now? Eli broke through the chaos and crashed into him. "We did it," the boy sobbed, arms wrapped tight around Marcus's neck. "We did it, Dad." Marcus held him, pressed his face into the boy's hair, let himself cry for the first time in longer than he could remember. "No," he whispered. "You did it, son. You stood, just like I taught you." Around them, the celebration continued. Brick was actually smiling. Something that happened maybe twice a decade. Angela was shaking hands with Dresden, who looked like he wasn't sure whether to be devastated or relieved. Even Catherine Marsh, standing alone by the petitioner's table, was watching with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Judge Holloway banged her gavel once, restoring order. "Mr. Crowe," she said, "take care of that boy." Marcus met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am, for the rest of my life." She nodded. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. Court is adjourned. If you believe that sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Biker's Bite, because these are the stories the world needs to hear. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment when family proves it's about choice, not blood. Outside the courthouse, the 100 bikers who'd filled the hallway had gathered in the parking lot. They formed 2 lines, creating a corridor of leather and loyalty leading to the waiting motorcycles. As Marcus and Eli emerged from the building, a cheer went up, fists pumping, horns honking, the thunder of Harleys revving in celebration. Eli stopped at the top of the courthouse steps, looking out at the sea of people who'd come for him. "They're really all here for me?" he asked, still not quite believing it. "For us," Marcus said. "For family." They walked through the corridor of bikers together. Every man they passed reached out to touch Eli's shoulder, to shake Marcus's hand, to be part of this moment. At the end of the line, Brick waited next to Marcus's Harley. "Ride's ready," he said gruffly. "Your boy's got a seat." Marcus looked at Eli. "You ready to go home?" Eli smiled, a real smile, the kind that transforms a face. "Yeah, Dad, I'm ready." He climbed onto the back of the Harley, small arms wrapping around Marcus's waist, like they belonged there, like they'd always belonged there. Marcus kicked the engine to life, the familiar roar now sweeter than any sound he'd ever heard. As they pulled out of the parking lot, 100 bikes fell into formation behind them, a river of chrome and thunder flowing through the streets of Bakersfield, turning heads and stopping traffic. A celebration, a declaration, a promise. Family rides together. The ride home from the courthouse felt different. Every mile Marcus had ever ridden, he'd ridden alone. Even with brothers at his back, even with a club behind him, there was a solitude that came with the road, a space between the handlebars and the horizon that belonged only to him. Now, small arms wrapped around his waist, a heartbeat pressed against his back, someone else's breath warming the leather between his shoulder blades. He wasn't alone anymore. Behind them, 100 motorcycles stretched back like a river of chrome and thunder. The formation held tight through every turn, every stoplight, every curious stare from civilians who'd never seen anything like this parade of leather and loyalty. Eli's grip tightened as they pulled onto the dirt road leading to the clubhouse. Home. For the first time in his life, the word meant something real. The celebration lasted until midnight. The clubhouse transformed into something Marcus had never seen. Music pounding, laughter everywhere, food covering every flat surface, courtesy of Jolene and a small army of club wives who'd descended with casseroles and cakes like a support battalion. But Marcus found himself watching the quiet moments more than the loud ones. Eli sitting in the corner with Bear, teaching the massive man some card trick Bobby had shown him. Bear's ham-sized hands fumbling the cards while Eli patiently corrected his grip. Brick pulling Eli aside for a chess match, the board set up on a barrel in the garage, the old president's face softer than anyone had ever seen it. Shadow, the club's paranoid conspiracy theorist who'd voted against Eli staying, pressing a small package into the boy's hands. A new set of socket wrenches, good ones, the kind that cost real money. For the shovelhead, Shadow muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. Kid's gonna need decent tools if he's working on our bikes. Eli looked at the wrenches like they were made of gold. By 10 p.m., the boy was fading, the adrenaline of the day finally draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Marcus found him asleep on the couch in the back room, curled up in a ball with his vest still on. Ghost. Marcus lifted him carefully, carried him to the back bay that had become his room. The mattress on the floor had been replaced with a real bed sometime during the hearing. A quilt covered it now, blue and gray, Jolene's handiwork. He laid Eli down, pulled the blanket over him, and stood watching in the dim light. The boy's face was peaceful, no twitching, no nightmares, no fear. For the first time since arriving 4 months ago, Eli looked like a child. Marcus sank into the chair beside the bed, the same chair he'd sat in 15 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and grief. Tyler. His son's name surfaced like a stone thrown into still water. Tyler Marcus Crow, born on a Tuesday in April, died on a Sunday in October, 6 years old, leukemia, the kind that came fast and took everything. Marcus remembered the hospital, the machines, the way Tyler's hand felt so small in his, the moment when the beeping stopped and the world went silent. He'd buried his son on a hill overlooking the desert, buried his heart in the same grave, joined the Iron Saints because he needed something to belong to, something to fill the void that used to hold a little boy who called him Daddy. For 15 years, he'd told himself he'd never love anything that much again, never open himself up to that kind of loss. It was safer to keep the walls up, easier to feel nothing than to feel everything. Then he'd stopped at an abandoned gas station to check a tick in his engine, and a voice from nowhere had said, "Your lifter's going bad." Marcus looked at Eli sleeping peacefully in the blue-gray quilt. Different boy, different eyes, different story, same love. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He'd been given a second chance, not to replace Tyler. Nothing could ever replace Tyler. But to love again, to be a father again, to let someone need him. "Thank you," he whispered, to whoever might be listening. Tyler's ghost, God, the universe, whatever force had put him at that gas station at that exact moment. "Thank you for sending him to me." In the bed, Eli stirred slightly. A small smile crossed his sleeping face. Maybe he heard. Maybe he just knew. Either way, they were home. The weeks that followed were a study in transformation. March came with warming weather and something Marcus hadn't expected: normalcy. Eli enrolled at Jefferson Middle School. His first day was a disaster of nerves and silence. He came home barely speaking, convinced everyone had stared at him, judged him, seen through him to the homeless kid he used to be. By the end of the first week, everything changed. Turned out, being the kid who lived with a motorcycle club made you automatically interesting. Being the kid who could explain how a combustion engine worked made you useful. And being the kid who stood up to a seventh-grade bully by calmly informing him that his Uncle Bear weighed 300 pounds and had once ripped a car door off its hinges made you someone nobody messed with. I didn't say Bear would hurt him, Eli explained to Marcus that evening. I just said Bear existed. He filled in the rest. Marcus tried to look disapproving, failed entirely. The back bay transformed too. What had been a temporary space became Eli's room. Real furniture now, a desk for homework, shelves lined with books Marcus had bought and Eli had devoured, posters on the walls, mostly motorcycles, but one of the periodic table, because engines are just chemistry, Dad. The shovelhead sat in the corner like a trophy. Eli still worked on it, fine-tuning, improving, but the desperate energy was gone. He wasn't fixing it to prove his worth anymore. He was fixing it because he loved the work. The brothers became uncles, not officially, not legally, but in every way that mattered. Bear taught him to cook. Simple stuff mostly, the kind of food that could feed a hungry boy after a long day. But also the kind of patience that came from following a recipe, trusting the process, knowing that good things took time. Bobby continued the card tricks, but added other skills too. Lockpicking, escape artistry. The kinds of things a road captain picked up over 30 years of living on the edge. Never know when you'll need to get out of somewhere fast, Bobby said with a wink. Jolene remained the immovable force of normalcy. Homework before garage time, vegetables before dessert, bedtime enforced regardless of protests. You're not raising a mechanic, she told Marcus. You're raising a man. Men need structure. She was right. She was always right. Stories like Eli's remind us why we do this. If this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe that second chances exist. Subscribe and hit the bell, because every kid deserves someone willing to fight for them. The final test came in April. A social worker named Thomas Reynolds showed up unannounced for a follow-up inspection. Standard procedure, he explained, just making sure the placement was working out. Marcus felt his hackles rise immediately. The old instinct, protect the pack, prepare for war. But Eli stopped him with a hand on his arm. Let me, the boy said quietly. Marcus watched as his son walked Thomas Reynolds through the clubhouse, not hiding anything, not apologizing for the leather and chrome and rough-edged men who called this place home. This is the kitchen, Eli explained. Jolene makes sure I eat balanced meals. She's strict about vegetables. I used to hate it, but now I kind of don't mind. And this is my room. I have a real bed now, and a desk for homework. My grades are mostly B's, except math. Math is A's because engines are basically math problems that make noise. And this is the garage. I rebuilt that shovelhead from nothing. The guys let me work on customer bikes now too, supervised. I'm learning every day. Reynolds took notes throughout. His face remained neutral, professional, but Marcus saw something shift in his eyes as the tour continued. Here was a child who'd been failed by every system designed to save him. Now thriving, now healthy, now speaking with confidence about a future he actually believed in. And these men, Reynolds asked carefully, they treat you well? Eli looked back at the garage, where Bear and Brick and Bobby had gathered, trying to look casual and failing miserably. They're my uncles, Eli said simply. Not by blood, by choice. They show up for me every day, even when it's hard. Reynolds closed his notebook. I think I've seen enough. Marcus's heart stopped, the old fear surging back. They're going to take him. After everything, they're going to... Mr. Crow, Reynolds said, in 15 years of child welfare work, I've rarely seen a placement this successful. Whatever you're doing here, keep doing it. He extended his hand. Marcus shook it, too stunned to speak. I'll be recommending that all supervisory requirements be lifted. As far as the state of California is concerned, Eli Harrison Crow is exactly where he belongs. The name hung in the air. Eli Harrison Crow. Marcus looked at his son. When did you... Eli shrugged, trying to look casual, failing just like the uncles. I asked the school to change it in their system. Figured it was time to make it official. Marcus pulled him into a hug right there in the driveway, in front of God and Thomas Reynolds and everyone. Yeah, he said roughly. Yeah, it was time. 3 months later, a perfect spring morning, the desert air clean and warm, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Eli stood in the clubhouse parking lot, staring at the small motorcycle in front of him, a 250cc starter bike, nothing like the Thunder his father rode, but it was his, really, truly his, a gift from the club for his 12th birthday, with strict instructions that he was only to ride on the property until he got his license. You ready? Marcus asked. Eli swallowed hard. He'd been waiting for this moment since October, since a voice from nowhere had diagnosed a stranger's engine and changed everything. Ready. He climbed on. The weight felt different from the shovel head, lower, lighter. His feet touched the ground easily. His hands found the grips like they belonged there. Marcus showed him the basics: clutch, throttle, brake, the balance point, the feel of the machine responding to small inputs. Remember, Marcus said, the bike wants to stay upright. Your job is to guide it, not fight it. Eli nodded, took a breath, kicked the engine to life. The sound was smaller than a Harley, higher, lighter, but it was still power, still freedom, still the promise of open roads. Behind him, he heard other engines starting, one by one, then all at once. He looked back. 12 Iron Saints sat on their Harleys in formation. Brick and Bear, Priest and Shadow, Bobby and the rest. Every man who'd voted yes and every man who'd voted no, now united behind a boy who'd become one of them, waiting to ride with him. Standard formation, Brick called out. Ghost takes the lead. We protect his back. Ghost, the boy who'd appeared out of nowhere. Eli twisted the throttle and let the bike carry him forward, slow at first, wobbly, his heart pounding with fear and joy and something he couldn't name. Then smoother, steadier, the balance finding itself just like Marcus said it would. He rode in a wide circle around the property, the formation following, 12 Harleys thundering behind one small bike like an honor guard escorting royalty. The wind hit his face, dried the tears he hadn't known were falling. Freedom. That's what this was. Not the escape kind, the running kind, the real kind, the kind you earn, the kind you choose. Eli completed the circle and brought the bike to a stop where he'd started. The formation pulled in around him, engines dying one by one until only silence remained. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was full. Complete. Family. 2 years later, the Iron Saints clubhouse looked the same from the outside. Inside, things had changed. A corner of the garage had been converted into a study space, not just for Eli anymore, but for the other kids who'd found their way here since. 3 of them this year, all boys, all broken in different ways, all slowly healing under the rough care of men who understood what it meant to come from hard places. Brick had called it Eli's idea at the club meeting, but really it had been a group decision. They'd seen what happened when someone took a chance on a lost kid. They wanted to do it again. Eli, now 13 and growing like a weed, had become the unofficial welcome committee. He remembered what it felt like to show up scared and suspicious. He knew how to speak that language. Engines make sense, he'd tell each new kid, leading them to the garage. They do what they're supposed to do. People are harder, but you learn. Marcus watched from the doorway as Eli explained the basics of a carburetor to a 9-year-old named James, who'd been found sleeping under a bridge in Fresno. The same patience, the same quiet confidence, the same belief that broken things could be fixed. The cycle continued. Hit that like button if you're rooting for these kids. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to people who need them. Organizations like Bikers Against Child Abuse have protected over 10,000 children worldwide. They stand guard at courthouses. They escort scared kids to school. They prove daily that family is not about blood, it's about choice. The Iron Saints became one of those organizations. Not officially, not with paperwork and nonprofit status, but in practice, in purpose, in the way that mattered. Every month, a new referral, a new kid who'd slipped through the cracks, a new chance to break the cycle. Not all of them stayed, not all of them healed. The system was still broken. Some kids were too damaged, or too angry, or too scared to let anyone in, but some of them made it. And for those kids, everything changed. The last ride of the summer came on a September evening. Eli, now comfortable on his 250, led a formation of 15 bikes down Route 58. The same road where Marcus had found him 2 years ago. The same desert. The same stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They stopped at the abandoned gas station. It looked smaller now, less frightening. Just an old building, slowly returning to the earth. Marcus pulled up beside his son. "Remember this place?" Eli stared at the rusted pumps, the broken windows, the spot behind the building where he'd slept on concrete and talked to stray dogs because they were the only creatures who treated him like a person. "I remember," he said quietly. "I remember being so scared, so alone." He looked at the formation of bikers waiting behind them, his uncles, his family. "I'm not scared anymore." Marcus nodded. Let the silence stretch. "You know what I remember?" he finally said. "A voice from nowhere telling me my lifter was going bad. This kid, 10 years old, diagnosing my engine in the dark." Eli smiled. "You needed better maintenance habits." "What I needed," Marcus said, "was you." The words hung in the air, simple, true. "Come on," Marcus said. "Let's go home." They pulled back onto the road, 2 bikes leading the formation now. Father and son, side by side, chrome gleaming in the fading light. Behind them, the abandoned gas station grew smaller, the past becoming the past. Ahead, the road stretched endless and full of possibility. Thank you for riding with us today. Sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts. And sometimes the smallest voice asking, "Be my friend," is the beginning of something that changes everything. If you've ever found family in unexpected places, tell us your story in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to believe that second chances are real. And remember, the rumble you hear might not be trouble. It might be help on the way. Subscribe to Bikers Bite. Hit that notification bell. Because every kid deserves someone who chooses them. Inspired by true stories of organizations like Bikers Against Child Abuse, who have protected over 10,000 children worldwide, and the countless motorcycle clubs who prove daily that family is not about blood, it's about choice.